All right. You made it. This is episode 1. The wait is finally over.
We did it, guys.
We did it. We got into some, we tried to get into some stuff.
Whether or not we actually did remains to be determined.
This might be a total train wreck, but we'll let you decide.
Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Kellen.
And hey, I'm Beau.
And you're listening to the Transplants podcast.
You know, like, oh, you made it to India instead or whatever, I'll just walk, you know?
Once you're in that spaceship, you're not coming back.
Have you ever, or when you were younger, did you ever get delusional?
We potentially could be the people who are doing the work to terraform these planets. I can't really, tell you a story that's going to be, meaningful or interesting in any way.
Right. Is it Wednesday? Because if it's not Wednesday, you go in the fucking basement.
Hey guys, welcome to the Transplants podcast. I'm one of the two-person team who's going to be talking to you, going to be coming in through your ear holes. I'm just filling time while Beau uses the restroom. We'll be starting shortly. Thank you for waiting. Thank you. You ready to do this?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Let's do this. Definitely getting headphones next time. There's no way I can Bluetooth, right?
Nah.
Okay.
We would have had to shell out way more cash if we wanted to get a Bluetooth.
Nah, I don't want Bluetooth. I like the cords, but you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay, everything is good to go. We are recording.
Excellent.
Yeah, I got the lovely sultry sounds of you using the restroom.
Did you really? Flushing the toilet as well?
Yeah, it's great. It's gonna be
Episode number 1.
Yeah,
starts with me peeing.
Yep. I
love
can't
it.
think of a more fitting way, considering that's been kind of what we've been doing. We've pissed what, a total of 5 times for this podcast to start.
I'm so nervous. Everyone's listening.
Oh God.
Let's do intros. Let's jump right into introductions, but you're going first this time after our failed first attempt.
Yeah, just a little bit of disclosure. This is our second attempt at recording this podcast.
Second attempt.
We obviously are new to this. We're troubleshooting out this whole sensitive microphone thing, testing out our voices. So bear with us.
And also, Will came in and used the microwave about 15 minutes in, which wasn't fantastic. And since we don't have a studio yet, we're in my living room.
It is a lovely living room, though.
It is. It's furnished. This podcast set is brought to you by Mrs. Roberts. Thank you, Mrs. Roberts, for furnishing my home. But for those of you that are brave enough to listen right now and that have already not just turned it off, we're going to give some intro so you can hear about what you're about to get into. Kellen, that is your name.
Yeah.
I would like you to start. Give me a little bit of background about where you're from, your favorite color, and then you can branch off from there.
I feel like I'm on the first day of class and they're making us all do our awkward introductions.
Yeah.
Like, what's your name? Say one interesting thing about yourself.
2
Where are
truths
you
and a
from? So my name's Kellen. Kellen Gromold, if you care. I'm a 20-year-old male living in Bozeman, Montana. But yeah, I'm 20 years old. I go to school at Montana State, and my favorite color is probably, I've always been pretty partial to turquoise myself. I've always thought turquoise, aquamarine was a pretty nice color.
You stole my color, so you have to ask me a different question.
Okay.
But go ahead.
So my favorite color before I was so rudely interrupted is turquoise or aquamarine. I've always thought it was just a very calming color. I'm not going to defend my favorite color choice to you. I don't feel like that's something
I want you to
need
ask me what my favorite color is again, because
I
have
don't
a better...
care what your favorite color is,
All right,
Beau.
fine. Okay, give me a little background. I want to hear about you.
Okay. I'm from South Lake Tahoe, California. I'm going
to interrupt again right there. I always thought Tahoe was in Nevada.
That's actually what I used to tell people when I first moved to Montana, because I was scared of the whole
California stereotype?
Yeah, so I'd tell people, I'm from South Lake Tahoe, Nevada. And then I felt like that got me around this whole stigma of being a Californian living in Montana.
Okay, well, I was in Tahoe once, and I remember someone's like, oh yeah, just right over those mountains is California. Mm-hmm. So what's going on there? Lake Tahoe, is that in Nevada?
It's in both.
Maybe I was on the Nevada side.
Yeah, well, the way Tahoe works is, you know how California and Nevada, they meet and they've got like a little angle? Mm-hmm. Like it's like, what is that, like 140 degrees or something like that? But that little point of that angle is right in the center of our lake. And for like a couple hundred years while they were finalizing state lines, that was a pretty big debate, is what state is Lake Tahoe in? And so that's kind of interesting. But it is officially, most of it is in California.
Okay.
But there is a Nevada side.
So you're one of those
That's where the free
Californians?
people live.
Okay. The free people.
Yeah. Like that's my, if I could go back to Tahoe, I would never live on the California side again. You can't drink on the beach there.
Oh.
No open containers.
You can't even legally drink as it is.
Spoiler alert, yeah. Counting down the days. What, 15 days till I can drink.
15.
Yeah.
That brings me up. I'm just gonna keep interrupting you unless I shut up. Sit
We're
back.
never gonna introduce our other hosts.
You're never gonna hear about me, but 15 days until you turn 21 and you're doing Sober October.
Right.
So you're not even gonna drink on your 21st birthday.
Right, yeah. That's true.
This is discipline, ladies and gentlemen.
But I've never really been a huge drinker in general, so it's not like that's a huge problem for me. I'm not like, I'm not going to be able to go and party on my 21st birthday. Like, I'm the type of guy who wants to just like smoke a joint, take a bath, and just like chill out and meditate. That's like my ideal, like 21st, you know.
Going buck wild, I get it.
What? What I really wanted to do, just because I understand that it's kind of like a rite of passage to, you're 21, you got to go to the bar. I wanted to go to the bar and get like the lamest drink that I could get. I want to go get an appletini or something like that.
Like a properly prepared cocktail.
Yeah, but something lame. I want the least amount of street cred possible. I want the bartender to look at me and be like, wow, you're lame.
You want like a little umbrella in it.
Yeah, exactly. and that's it. I just want the one drink and I'm leaving.
Wow.
But I think it's important as a rite of passage. When I turned 18, I didn't smoke cigarettes, but I went and bought a pack of cigarettes just on principle.
I think I did that too, and I just gave them to somebody.
I definitely smoked all of them.
Did you?
Yeah, for sure.
That's never been an issue for me, smoking tobacco. I very much dislike it. But I'm going to interrupt you to interrupt myself and say, I need to shut up and I want to hear about you.
Okay.
And where you came from.
Okay. So I'm from South Lake Tahoe. Some of you may be familiar with Tahoe. It's kind of a famous place.
It's in California and Nevada.
Yeah, I know. Crazy. But so it's the second largest alpine lake in the United States, which is pretty dope. I feel pretty proud about that. We're one of the clearest lakes in the United States. Pretty proud about that. It's full of people from the Bay Area now. Not very proud of that. But it was a cool place to grow up, and I think that that's one of the things that I'm really interested in is I'm really interested in ecology. I'm really interested in nature, and I think that that's 100% a function of where I grew up. Tahoe it's kind of got that same feel of Bozeman, where you're in the mountains, you're surrounded by nature, and it's not something you can get away from. It's always right in your face. Look at how beautiful this place is. This is a place that needs to be preserved. So ever since I was born, that's been something that's been very much on my mind, is how important it is to love where you live, you know? And so Tahoe has uniquely shaped me to be a huge conservation hippie, you know? But because I grew up in Tahoe, obviously, I'm just like everybody else who lives in Bozeman. I like to hike, like to bike, like to be outdoors,
But you like to bike specifically on pavement.
Yeah, I guess, which is kind of unique because everybody else here feels like they're a mountain biker, but
I too share that desire for some fresh tar.
yeah, but that's because you're a dirty city slicker.
Yeah, that's true. That's also true.
Yeah, so where are you from, Beau?
Yeah. My name is Beau. I'm going to not disclose my last name.
Damn.
Yeah, I'm like that.
Look me up on Instagram, Kellen_Gronwald.
My Instagram isn't even my name. I'm very hidden about a lot of that stuff. My favorite color is turquoise, and here's why. Blue is a very cool color, and I'm talking cool not as in like awesome. I'm talking very like mellow. Mm-hmm. And I have tranquil turquoise. I know you didn't ask. I just felt like saying it.
I actually specifically said I didn't care what your favorite color was.
And because you said that, I'm going to say it again. My favorite color is turquoise. And I was born and raised in Minneapolis or the suburbs in that area in Minnesota. You threw out some lake stuff. You got the clearest lake up in Tahoe. We have over 10,000 lakes in Minnesota.
But they're like lame lakes.
Not really. I would disagree wholeheartedly, considering that the largest lake in the world is also on our border, Lake Superior. #Lake Superior. But lakes don't really get me anymore. I mean, they're fun, but it's like I've seen and been on and skied and tubed on so many of them. It's kind of like I'd rather see mountains, which there are none of in Minnesota.
Right.
Lived there till I was 18 years old. And then I decided not to go to school. And I don't know how much of a decision it was, is that I didn't really get into any schools because I wasn't a great student, but moved to Mexico, lived there when I turned 18. And then from there, I think I was back and forth a couple times. And then I moved to Los Angeles when I was 20. And then moved on to Africa, lived in Russia, now I'm here in Bozeman. But
what he's really saying is that he's cooler than all of us guys.
I'm trying to tell you that I'm cooler than anyone. Pretty much. Nah, I kind of use that as an excuse to travel the world, but only to realize that in today's economy, you got to be really smart, really smart to do it on your own, or you should get a college education so that you can better yourself and get a job that's going to be decently paying. But for me, it's not even just about that. It's about education. I'm really interested in the field of study that I'm in now. So that's,
what are you studying, Beau?
I am in the rangeland ecology program with the specialty in wildlife habitat ecology and management.
Nerd.
Absolute nerd. I like systems like you, because you're in what?
Agroecology.
Yeah, with a specialty in
agroecology is the specialty.
Okay, sorry. The main degree is
sustainable food and bioenergy systems.
Yeah, so we kind of have some overlap, and I think that's probably what's pretty interesting about when we get together is we pretty much agree on a lot of things, but we both have an interest in the same realm, which is why I want to do this podcast, because I want to get into some of that deep stuff that we don't normally talk about in a 101 class or, on the streets.
Yeah, or to actually think of applications for it, you can talk about facts and what's happening as much as you want, but at a certain level, people have to know what they want to do with that. Why does this matter?
Right.
And so it's just interesting getting a chance to talk about this, actually get to talk about it and not get lectured about it.
Definitely. And that's why we're called the Transplants Podcast, partly because neither of us are from Bozeman here, which you're hearing us not live from Bozeman. And I think I looked it up. Minneapolis and Tahoe are almost the exact same distance away from Bozeman, just on opposite, directions.
How long's your drive?
Well, the drive wouldn't be the same. I'm talking as the crow flies, because mine is about 12 hours.
That's pretty similar to how long it takes to get to Tahoe, depending on how ballsy you feel driving through
I usually
Idaho.
go 5 miles above the speed limit, because I can argue out of that one.
That's fair.
You know what I'm saying?
What I've always heard my parents had a friend who was a cop. He always had a saying. It was like, under 9, you're fine. Over 9, you're mine.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I think the processing of the ticket costs more than the ticket itself for under 9 miles an hour, or of the speed limit.
Yeah.
So it's like, by the time that I'm pulling him over, talking to him, writing up the license, somebody that just went 15 over just drove past me, or, the opposite way. So it's kind of like, I'll wait.
But if you got a California license plate and you're in Idaho, anything's fair
They're
game.
coming for you.
Yeah,
I actually had a
man.
California driver's license, in Nebraska, and I was going like 20 over, and a car passed me as I was getting pulled over, which means that he was going at least like 5 miles faster than I was. And I was like, yeah, what about that guy? He goes, well, you stopped. God.
But I'm sure the cop he had some sympathy for you because he understood that you were just trying to get out of Nebraska as fast as possible.
Everybody tries to. My sister's there right now going to school.
Oh, poor
Megan,
thing.
get out. There's nothing there, just corn. No, Nebraska probably 150 years ago was a beautiful place, just prairies and bison and, probably even teepees at that point still on the horizon.
Yeah.
Actually, my dad has stories about his father, my grandpa, would, as a school kid, would like go over the hill and there was still smoke rising from teepees. Like, this is South Dakota. It's not Nebraska, but still, like that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
And I think even his son, my uncle, got kidnapped by some native boys a couple times. Yeah. A tumultuous time and area for the natives.
But I bet it was a real character building experience. Like, I don't know anybody who ever was kidnapped by natives. It sounds like I wish I had that experience.
Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like we're missing out. I feel like we were raised in too safe of an environment.
That's absolutely true. I absolutely agree with what you're saying on that, because my eye-opening experience was when I was 18 and I moved to Mexico, and I was like, oh my God. I remember this very vividly, being like, my whole life, I feel like I have been looking at the world from the top of a tower, just looking down on the world. And when I got to Mexico, I mean, this is Mexico City. Gabriel Mancera, if anybody knows that area, it's not that pretty. And living in a little apartment, kind of rinky-dink shack with cockroaches and, we had a maid, but she was kind of like,
was she a maid in the same way that you're a cleaning person, where it was just
no?
She that's kind of clean.
She lived upstairs on the roof in literally a tin shack, and I think she had something wrong with her, and that was like the only job she could get. So we were sympathetic to her. She was very sweet. But even the maids there, it was kind of that's cultural, I think, to have a maid. But it was still a very uncomfortable experience for me. And I felt like for the first time in my life, I was looking at the world from the ground. And I was like, oh, okay. So little Edina, Minnesota is not the way life works. And it was hard to get that smell of petroleum and like broken glass out of my, into my ideas of what the life is like for a lot of people.
Right.
And that hardship really did give me some character, I think.
You hope.
I hope so. Probably really boring to listen to and talk to. Who knows?
I don't know. I don't know anybody who's lived in Mexico City. Like, I couldn't imagine living there because I have never had that sort of eye-opening experience where I've gone to some place and I was like, oh, wow, this is, I mean, I lived in Los Angeles, which is the lowest point I've ever gotten. But some people, Los Angeles is their paradise.
That's absolutely true.
You can't compare a place like Los Angeles to Mexico City, And so to me, that just sounds really interesting. I have because all I know about Mexico City is the things I see in like movies like Sicario or in the media, and it just looks.
The day before I moved there, like 3 tourists got their heads cut off. Like,
you see, that's my perception of
and it
Mexico
is a beautiful
City.
Culture and place. It's very overpopulated and it's very dirty, but there's the culture of Mexico, and I love Mexican people and the culture. And
I've heard in Mexico City you're not supposed to stop at stoplights. Is that something?
The interesting thing about that is they have the curb bumps that you go, or not the curb, the little speed bumps, because no one's going to stop. So the only way you can get people to stop is literally physically putting a barrier, so they have to slow down so that they don't just hustle through it. But yeah, you're supposed to be very vigilant walking across the street. And I lived in Acapulco when I was very, very little, before I can even remember. And there were like bullet holes above my crib, according to my family that was telling me this stuff. So that might have just been fabricated. However, moving and living to a place like that really gives you perspective and gratitude for the life that you were given, if you were given a good life. And I'm very, very blessed and thankful for the life that I did, that I still have.
Right.
But you're right. Those perspectives give you like this altering view of like, whoa, I should like pay attention to the fact that I can drink the tap water here,
Right.
and not get giardia or worse. So
shout out to Bozeman for having
shout out to
drinkable
Bozeman
tap
for having
water.
pretty decent water to drink. Minneapolis is very good. It's very tasty.
You think better than Bozeman? I think
I
Bozeman's
think
got
Minneapolis
some
is
pretty
like
fantastic
literally
tap water.
rated nationally as one of the best waters.
That's crazy.
We're the city of water. I think Minneapolis is a city, and Minnie, I believe in the Sioux or
small.
Lakota means water.
Oh.
The city of water, I believe. That may be absolutely incorrect. I know Tonka means big, and Minnetonka is our large lake that's in the city. It's big water. That would make sense. That's how
Okay.
I'm trying to put that
trying
together.
to extrapolate.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Anyone's listening, call me. Let me know.
Yeah, he won't tell you his last name, but we'll
should
make
have a
sure to
calling
publish
service.
his phone
You
number.
can
down
publish
here.
all my information. So you came out to Bozeman
Yeah.
a couple years ago.
Yeah, I came up as a freshman in 2014, 2015.
Wow, really? You've been here for a while.
Well, I took a 6-month hiatus to go live in Los Angeles. That was
Why?
Really came out here as a freshman, and I think that I would have really benefited from doing what you did. And I think a lot of people probably would agree with me, because I feel like a lot of people in my generation, we were, especially if you have parents that are educated, there's just that push to graduate and you have to go to school. I never had the option of just going and getting a job or joining a trade. My parents said, Kellen, you need to graduate. You need to go to college. And so that's what I did. I did my senior year. I did the whole apply to colleges thing, stressed myself out, and thought like, this is where the rest of my life begins, Mm-hmm. And so I came up here straight out of high
Compton?
school. Straight, definitely not. Straight out of Tahoe. Shout out
California side.
3530. Yeah. No, but I came here as a freshman. I was 17 years old too, because of the way that
You're a youngin'.
yeah, the way that like cutoff dates work for school. I was the younger generation of people.
You're
in my
quite
classes.
young.
Yeah, so I was
You had your birthday after summer, basically, growing up.
right.
Wow. Because I was late spring and I thought I was young. You were really young.
Yeah, for sure. So I wasn't ready to be out here on my own. Generally, is what I just feel like I wasn't emotionally developed. I didn't know how to. I had left my whole friend group behind. And that was a very alienating experience, and in Tahoe, it had always been very easy to make friends. It wasn't something that you had to think about or put work to. It was just like I don't even know how I met like my friends in Tahoe. It's just something that comes with where you grow up. And so having that not ripped from me, but leaving that was really challenging as a freshman. I didn't know how to adapt, and so at the end of my freshman year, and I was also 700 miles from home. I wasn't able to just on the weekends go home and see my family, pet my cats, see my dogs. So I got pretty lonely, and I felt like I don't think I can hack it up here in Montana. I think I got to go back to California. So I went back to California for the summer, got a job at I was gonna say shitty restaurant, but I don't want to tarnish the reputation
shout out.
of the Beacon, South Lake Tahoe. We've got best calamari on the lake.
Yeah, when are their hours?
Don't go to the Beacon. I'm gonna just tell you guys right now, it's very highly rated. Everybody rates the Beacon as one of the must-visit places in Lake Tahoe. I'm gonna tell you, somebody who's worked in that kitchen, it is so disgusting. It's such a fucked up place. Do not go to the Beacon.
You
But
discover that about any kitchen.
yeah,
You'd be very surprised.
yeah, don't eat at restaurants actually.
Pretty much.
But so I went and I got that job at the Beacon for like 6 months or whatever, and then decided, all right, I've got to keep going to school, mainly because I'd already had 1 year of student loans, and if you stop going to school, you got to start paying those loans back. So I was like, all right, I'll go to community college. I had a grandma who lived in Manhattan Beach, and she was going and traveling Europe for a couple months and needed somebody to watch her house. And so I was like, okay, I'll go live in Manhattan Beach, watch your house. I'll go to school.
Which school did you go to?
I went to El Camino Community College on Crenshaw Boulevard. It was a beautiful place.
Nice.
Beautiful place. Yeah, I loved my morning commute for sure.
Really?
Yeah, straight down Rosecrans. Just not a fun place to live, for me at least. I understand there are people, for some people, Los Angeles is their heaven, you know? Which I don't understand.
My brother
at
lives
all.
there now, and I think he really enjoys it. I'm not sure, but it's a rat race. It's a grind,
Yeah.
and
And you don't matter.
you
in
don't.
Los
You're just
Angeles.
swallowed up in the sea of other people and other people's interests, and I find it to be
And other people's garbage.
survivalist. And so nobody really cares about other people. It's like you care about yourself, and that's it. You just want to get to the top and do whatever you can. There's a lot of pulling other people down to get to where you need to be. But I don't know, maybe he's enjoying it. If
Maybe he's on top.
I bet he will. He's a smart kid. He'll make it to the top.
figure it out.
Yeah.
But that was exactly my experience in Los Angeles as well. And coming from being somebody who'd lived in South Lake Tahoe and then moved to a place like Bozeman, Montana, and then going to Los Angeles, it was just not an environment that made any sense for me. I remember about 2 months in to living in Los Angeles, I was really getting the like urge to go for a hike, you know? I was like, I just want to go on a backpacking trip. I want to get out in the forest. And I'm looking for places to go hike, and there's nowhere within 2 miles. I would search up hikes near Los Angeles, and they're all,
Runyon Canyon wasn't doing it for you?
yeah, they're like paved trails with handrails up them. And I'm just, this isn't hiking. This isn't, like, I'm used to hiking places like Desolation Wilderness in South Lake Tahoe, which is just extremely beautiful, and they're real trails. And so I remember I did eventually find a trail out in the Angeles National Forest, and me and my buddy went on a little hike on the PCT out there. It was only like 7 miles, but it was a pretty fun hike, but it just wasn't the sort of terrain and the environment that I was used to. And it took me 2 hours to get out there. And on that trip, that was when I really realized that Los Angeles or Southern California in general really just wasn't the place for me. And also, this was around the time where my grandma got back into Los Angeles, and I no longer had the beach house to myself. And so it became a little bit less exciting being in Los Angeles. And so I decided, okay, let's go try this Montana thing again. Because while I was in Los Angeles, I was physically closer to Tahoe, but I wasn't coming home. It's not like the distance actually made any difference for my homesickness, you know? So that kind of made me realize, like, whether you're 300 miles away or 700 miles away, it really doesn't make a difference. You might as well go someplace that's beautiful, that you love. And so that brought me back to Bozeman. I came back to Bozeman in 2016, I think. January of 2016 was when I started my residency period, because I came up here to try to get residency so I could do the school thing a little bit cheaper. And that's why I've been here so long. I had to do that residency period, which for anybody listening who doesn't know, who may be thinking about getting residency, on the other side, it's definitely worth it. But in the moment, it is a huge pain in the ass, massive hassle.
Or try to become a resident before you start going to school.
Right.
That would be the preferred outlet. But the university, Montana State University, does not acknowledge regular residency. They have their own little loopholes.
Right.
I'm currently in that process right now. So
Yeah, what's your experience like trying to become a resident?
it's okay. I've worked in the regular atmosphere for 10 years now. So last semester I was a non-resident, and my parents paying out the ass for that. Mm-hmm. But I was going to school full time. So I was like, okay, I'm in the school, realm now. And it was fine. It was lovely. And now that I have to work, and I had a job, I just worked only like 15 hours a week. So now that I'm doing this and I can only take 2 classes, I have 1 class a day for 1 hour. So I got to get back in the swing of working again, which I was trying to get out of, or I was in the process of like, okay, now I'm going to be in school and my focus is study. I moved back into the work space, and it's not bad because I've already done it before. It's just a grind that I wish I would have done that first.
Yeah.
Came out here, lived here for a year, worked, just enjoyed Bozeman, and then gone to school. Doing both at the same time and I props to those people who can do both. It's just not very. I know people who are going to school full time and working full time, so I have nothing to complain about.
Right.
But
getting residency is a unique challenge in that you aren't, because you're only allowed to take 6 credits per semester for those who don't know how the residency thing works at MSU. But only taking 6 credits at a time, it makes it really hard to feel like you're even a part of school. You've got to wake up and go to 1 class per day, and you're like, I've just got 1 class. There's nothing keeping you on campus.
And it's a 101 or a 102 or a 201 rather.
Yeah,
so
it's not holding your interest.
Not really in my field of study. I'm just taking it to bust out the credit, and it's like, oh, I forgot to read that thing for today because I wasn't really immersed in school. Mm-hmm. So now I have to cram and read. It's not, I understand why they do it. They're trying to keep making money. It makes sense. I mean, I get it from their economic standpoint. From a student standpoint, it's really kind of a pain. But like I said, I'm happy to be in school. So,
and from the other side, it definitely is worth it. But
yeah, absolutely.
But so yeah, that's sort of my story. I got residency. It took me a year, and then I finally got to start up again, and it felt great. And so here I am, my official senior year, but credit-wise, I'm still only a sophomore.
Mm-hmm.
But
so you still have some years to go.
Yeah, still. I'm thinking probably 3 more years realistically for me for school. But I've finally found a major that I'm really interested in. I'm in the agroecology program, which for me is a really good fit, and I could stay here for as long as it takes because I love every class that I'm taking in the department. So
do you think you'll stay in Bozeman after you graduate?
I'm gonna go where the jobs are. I hope that Bozeman grows in a way where there are plenty of jobs available for people in sustainable agriculture. Like, well, a big name in the Bozeman local foods community is Dylan Strike, owner of Strike Farms, who's kind of like a personal hero of mine. But he's only 28 or something like that, and he's a graduate of the Sustainable Food and Bioenergy Systems in agroecology, and he owns the biggest organic farm in the Gallatin Valley. He just bought a new 40-acre property last year, which is now fully operational. He sells food all across Montana, like in places like Ennis, they order his food. So he's a real inspiration. So if Dylan Strike doesn't take all of the organic farming opportunities, then I would like to stay in Bozeman. But I'm going to go wherever I can farm. And I also, because I'm young and I like to smoke weed, I'd be down to just kind of drop off the map, go live on my own property and just farm and sustain myself. I'm not really attracted to the rat race of just trying to accumulate wealth, I guess I don't really care about culture so much as I care about just living a fulfilling life for myself. And I find hard work to be really fulfilling. And I guess I have a really romantic view of the homesteaders. Like I think a lot of people our age do, which I think is sort of a function of our time where we are, where things are changing so fast and we don't really know where we're going with technology. I think a lot of people really want to grab onto something real and stable. And that's what's really attracted to me about the idea of the old school homesteaders. So if I could just not get a job, but just learn enough about agriculture and systems ecology that I could live, that I could support myself, that's the real dream, more so than actually getting a real job.
I think that's
who wants a real job, dude?
Yeah. And I think that's true for this generation, or more so for this generation, is now that we have, this isn't 1812 and we've got a you only have X amount of crops and it's hard and you got to build your own irrigation systems. Like the technological advancements that we have to make homesteading possible is so easy, or at least accessible now.
Right.
Plus our distrust in the government and our distrust in just the system of providing for us. You hear about like the Social Security and Medicaid and 401ks and all this stuff, and nobody's really sure anymore. It's kind of like, well, let's just be self-sustainable then.
Right.
And so I understand your desire to go, because that too is one of my biggest dreams, is just plot of land. I don't need to make money and I don't really need to be a part of society. But if me and my little group, my little family or whatever can be sustainably and happy and fulfilled in that way, living off the land and providing a function of meaning rather than a career, I would be so much more interested in that.
Yeah.
So trying to reconcile that with living in an economic world and a capitalist society. But I hear you. I see your desire to go and do that for sure.
Yeah. And so that's one of the reasons I think Montana State is so great, is because we've got programs like agroecology or your rangeland ecology, where we're not getting a business degree where you're pigeonholed into having to go into an industry. I like that we're learning an actual skill, because I've always kind of regretted not going to a trade school and learning how to do something. And I feel like by learning agriculture, you sort of, or in that same field, you're learning how to do something, learning how to grow plants, which is pretty much the reason why we exist as people.
Yeah, exactly.
We can grow plants.
And
shout out to plants.
Today, in addition to the technological advancements that make homesteading so easy, it also, with YouTube and multiple outlets, that I can learn how to do some of these trades. I won't be a licensed carpenter, but I can look up how to wedge a, pole or something like that, or look up building code and do it at least appropriately on my own without having to go to a trade school. So
yeah, but you got to deal with bullshit like building code. Like back in the 1800s, they're settling the West out here. Nobody gave a fuck about building code. It was just like, hey, did that building fall down? Nope, third winter in, it's still going.
Yeah,
it's
right.
like, oh, tight.
Well, yeah, but also I wanted the security of knowing that it's not going to fall down.
Security's lame. It's all about trial and error, man.
That's true.
It's a character building experience when your house collapses.
Yeah, my house has never collapsed, so I don't really know.
Look at this guy, the absolute picture of privilege right here. He's never had his house collapse on him.
So you're enjoying it here?
Yeah, I gotta say, shout out to Bozeman for sure.
Definitely.
I don't think there's many people who make it out here who don't fall in love with this place.
It attracts a certain crowd, for sure.
Right.
And that crowd is now growing to have different interests as well, but specifically outdoor recreation is one of the biggest things that's really driving people to come and live here. I don't know how much we should really promote this place, because I don't want to too many people here. It kind of sucks.
If you're not from Bozeman, just don't listen to the podcast.
Yeah, don't listen to this. This is for Bozemanites only.
Obviously.
Bozemanians? Bozemanites?
I don't know what
Bozemeeple?
Bozemeeple?
Yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah.
Bozemates.
Bozemates. Oh, that's a good one.
It sounds too much like Postmates though.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Postmates is just a company that I'd rather not
Okay.
give a free advertisement to.
Yeah.
But Postmates, if you're looking for somebody to advertise for you,
Yeah, we could do it as Bozemates. It would make perfect sense.
or we could just rip them off. We could just start it. I don't think Postmates has got a foothold in Bozeman yet.
Yeah, they don't have a monopoly yet. We don't need to talk about them anymore.
No. But it's like before Uber came here, like we could have just started our own Uber. Like
Bozuber.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the great things about being in Montana, is that things take a while to get out here. I just wonder how many of those ideas could we like steal for our own gain before could we make like a Bozeman version of, Amazon is here, but I was going to say, could we make like a Bozeman version of Amazon?
Bozemazon.
Yeah. We're just going to put Bose in front of the real companies.
Yeah.
And
Same logo.
Same logo.
Just with a stickered on Bose. Really embarrassing moment. For some reason, Amazon, I thought, was a South American company. And I was like, God, it seems really inefficient to ship all this stuff from Brazil. Yeah. I'm just going to say
That's
that.
pretty funny.
Yeah, I retract that.
I mean,
now.
the name definitely is confusing for
Misleading.
sure. I think it's because they started off making books, right? And
they did, didn't they?
Yeah, their niche was that they were chopping down the rainforest because it was cheaper for them to use the rainforest, and they were printing books on it.
Is that true?
No,
That's not true at all.
That'd be a terrible business
That would
model.
yeah. It's probably going on in some places though.
Yeah, I
But
wonder how many of the
you don't make
books-
books out of mahogany trees. The hardwood is too valuable to chop it up and make pulp.
Maybe you don't, but
Well, right, that's
I
true. I don't
definitely-
do a lot of things.
but I only read books made on mahogany paper.
Okay,
None-
you
none of
class act.
Yeah, none of that middle of the mall shit for me, man. Hold myself to a higher standard.
Yeah.
No, isn't all paper's made of like balsa? Balsa's not even a real tree. Right?
Balsam with an M.
Is balsam a real tree though? I thought it was like a fake wood or something like that.
No, balsam is a tree. I don't know what paper's made out of. I'll tell you what though, the paper mills in the Northeast, I mean that's all like white pine. So
You ever been around a paper mill?
yeah,
Smell like straight ass.
doesn't smell great, and it's on a river.
It sounds like a great idea.
You know, it's
Pumping
a weird
straight
thing.
lignin
Well,
into
those
the rivers.
loggers would kind of do that game where they try to knock the other person off, where they roll the log down the river. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
Yeah, come on. There's two guys on a log, and they try to run back and forth to get the other guy to fall off. You never seen that? Not in person, but like in cartoons.
I get what you're saying. I thought you meant they were running up and down the log, like
No.
fighting
They're
each other.
rotating the log
yeah.
to try to get the other guy to fall off. But that was just like a game they play because they'd be just hucking logs down. Log jam. That's where that came from. You jam up the river. Now you got to unjam the logs.
This sounds so sketch. Getting in there.
Many people died. No doubt, undoubtedly, they died in that process.
Another character building experience right there, I'm sure.
Interesting, interesting process though. I was hiking the Appalachian Trail last summer, and we made it up through New Hampshire. We did the whole thing, but up in New Hampshire, a lot of the logging communities were completely shut down because of digital. Where we used to put everything on paper, now it's all digital, or majority of it is. So all these paper mills shut down. So now the forest just grew back, and like they're still logging in areas up there. But New England, that used to be like farm country after it was logged, is now regained that presence of a boreal forest.
That's really
and
cool.
It was very, very interesting hiking through those areas where it wasn't old growth forest, but it was still untouched for many years, and it felt very appropriate. It was like, that is what this is supposed to resemble. However, in the middle of these forests, there were these stone pylons that were cattle fences or cattle gates in the middle of the forest. And it's just a very strange thing to see. And that's all over New England. You find these barriers where they had cut down, then they had placed up all these rocks as in paddocks to keep the animals in. And now as it's gone, they're just ghost farms in the middle of the forest. It's very kind of a cool thing how nature reclaimed that area.
I think that's always weird though when you go hiking and you see you're out there, you're 20 miles in the backcountry and you see a cattle fence and you're like, whoa. Especially because that stuff is so old, and you just imagine those. I guess you have that romantic idea. For me, like in the Sierras, we've got a lot of high alpine cattle runs. People would build small ranches up in the mountains, and people would run their cattle all through the mountains. And that's just such an amazing idea. Like obviously that wasn't a forest at that time; it was just farm. So you're not gonna get that same effect. But I think ranchers get to live in some really cool places.
They do. They do, and they work hard to live in those places for sure. But the thing about the East Coast is that it's got more history relative to America than the West really does. And so you're looking at these pylons, and it's like, these could be 300 years old.
Right.
And the people that, basically built the economy of America by logging and doing all this stuff, and it's just still there. It's like a memoir to that time in history, which to me as an environmental, I don't want to be an environmentalist anymore. I decided that I take that out. But me as a naturalist, I will use that word. Really, that was a dark period for the world when the boreal forests and the deciduous forests of the East were just desecrated in the name of the economy, in the name of the free market.
I mean, that's something that you see everywhere in Lake Tahoe. This is like a huge tragedy. Is we're pretty much, if you look at the trees, we're pretty much all Jeffrey pines right now, because during the gold rush in California and the silver rush in Nevada, they clear cut the entire basin so that they'd have posts to hold up their mine shafts. And then when they came and replanted everything, they just replanted Jeffrey pine
because that was the most
everywhere.
Economic
because it would grow the fastest.
Fast growing tree grows straight. You know, that's what happened with the Northeast as well. It's not diverse. It's a woodland. You know, it's not this beautiful forest full of biodiversity. It's very quiet and very eerie in those forests. And I thought about, as I was hiking through, all of the chestnut trees that are not there.
The chestnuts
Passenger
are
pigeons that
uniquely
don't
sad,
fly
though.
over. What now?
The chestnuts are uniquely sad though, because especially the American chestnut
That died from the blight.
Yeah, such a useful tree. I mean, I guess this comes back to its economic value is really what's interesting about the chestnut tree. But the fact that it's extinct and it was a North American species is a huge bummer.
It's a huge bummer. I'm reading this book, American Serengeti, by Dan Flores, and it's talking about how, you know, specifically native animals to America, North America, which would be the pronghorn, and the coyote. Those two are like really one of our only big mammal species that are absolutely native, and how all of that stuff in the name of the free market, in the name of capitalism, was looked at as just a natural resource to be used, just like the trees, you know, like the redwood forests. It was like that tree is looked at as a single commodity, not as a living system, and the potential for, transpiration, evaporation, water quality, all of these other things that probably are economically so much more wealthy than just the wood product.
Right.
It's just unbelievable. And even today, after clear cutting happens along the hillsides, they're just like, all right, we're going to plant, lodgepole pine or whatever, just because it grows fast. We'll get a faster harvest out of it, and we can keep the lumber industry, going.
Yeah.
And I just find that to be a waste of potential, especially because that's the degree that I'm in, and I'm learning all about the value, the price of these commodities, not necessarily the value.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? There's a difference.
And that's looking at its value as a commodity versus its value as a part of the natural system. Because these ecosystem services that these things provide are far more valuable in the long run than the value of just that wood. Because that tree, by providing a habitat for the, pardon me.
Yeah.
By providing a habitat for the native woodland life that help me.
I don't know what you're trying to say.
My train of thought
You're talking
is
about value
deteriorating.
of a system and ecological rather than just a commodity, a single-use commodity.
Right. For trees, I'm having a harder time conceptualizing it, but when we look at like the bees or something like that, which you can look. Oh fuck.
That's okay. I'll branch off of that, because one of the things that I would really like to focus on is finding the economic value in a system rather than a commodity, and that's where I think a lot of conservatives move away from the idea and dismiss ecological processes as liberal conspiracy to keep the bunnies and the fawns happy and alive in a singular individual species rather than like systematically. And I don't, and one of the problems that I find is GDP, gross domestic product, which is a really stupid way to measure the value of commodities in a country, because let's say there's a strand of timber that you clear cut. Now you have mudslides. So you get the product, the GDP from the product of the timber, but then you have the mudslide. So then you have the GDP of cleaning up the mudslide, and then you have poor water quality, and then you have the GDP of cleaning up the water. It's just, that's a very downward spiral of growth, of economic growth.
It's like one step forward, two steps back.
It doesn't work in the
almost.
long run. Versus, let's protect this area because of the watershed, which is more important over a long period of time than the immediate economic gain of clear cutting that forest. And I'm not anti-timber. As a conservationist, I recognize timber as a valuable, renewable product. But I don't think that every tree should be looked at as a, dollar sign.
Right.
In that way. I think it should be looked at in a long-term, and that's why I absolutely love is commemorate. Is that a word?
Commemorate is a word.
Commemorate people like John Muir, Teddy Roosevelt, Aldo Leopold, a lot of these conservationists who back in the day were like, wait a second, this is more valuable in the long term. We got to really be looking at this from a different perspective.
Yeah, they were really ahead of their time for sure.
Unbelievably.
Because back then, you can't blame these early settlers who came and clear cut these forests because they didn't understand the impact that they would have. It's like when Aldous Huxley's dad, Thomas Huxley, I remember he did a survey. He was like charged by some European government to do a survey of the oceans and to measure how potentially economically feasible the fishing industry could be. And his conclusion was that there are so many fish in the Atlantic Ocean that we could never possibly imagine putting a dent in these populations. And here we are some 150 years later, and there's a real concern about the state of life in the oceans. But everything just seemed so big to people at that time, and they didn't have the tools and technology to be able to understand how interconnected all these natural systems really are.
And the world was big back then, because there were less people. In the 1900s, at the turn of the century, there were only 1 billion people on planet Earth. That's
right.
Increased sevenfold.
So the number 7 billion people, I'm sure isn't even. I can't even imagine what 7 billion people
I don't have
really
a clue what
looks
that
like.
means.
So to people back in the 1800s, to imagine that there would have been 7 billion people on Earth, it's just a ridiculous.
And we're still using products like we are only 1 billion people.
Right.
And that's where I think the issue is. There's many issues. We can go on for days, but one of the issues is consumption and how much we use, and and individually, especially in more developed nations where the use is heavier. And I think that just comes over from past experiences of less famine because of technological advancements, more ability because of colonialization, where we can get tea and spices from India, whereas the poor African nations and South American and other less fortunate countries don't really see we'll just get it from there. Mm-hmm. It's like we got to use what we have, and so they're the most sustainable because they're living in their own small communities, which makes the most sense. But
there's a balance between sustainability and economic feasibility it's hard to look at, because when you look at these people who are producing everything themselves, if they were to just specialize and produce the one thing that grows best for them, they could consume more of that product and then trade their excess for something else, and they can get more of whatever they didn't have to begin with in return. So if you want, it's just, and because we only look at the commodity value of these things, it's easy to look at things like that and say I can get X amount of money if I just grow this crop and then trade half of that off to get Y crop in return. But you don't look at the cost of the cost to your soil and your community and potentially your culture by specializing like that and following that what makes the most sense economically. And like you're saying, I think it's just going to be something that we develop over time as we as a species becomes more mature and understand our impact a little bit more. We'll be able to quantify these externalities a little bit better and hopefully have an economy that I think the economy would in general run better because like you're saying, we wouldn't have to account for like landslides and as like sea level rise. There's a lot of things that we're going to have to pay a lot of money to fix because in that short term we were looking at how much money can I make off of this resource if I use all of it, you know?
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting about the America and the West in particular is how that was the darkest time in ecological history of mankind, I would say, or one of the many dark times. And at its very tail end, it was one of the most potentially enlightening times. And I'm specifically talking about, we cut down all the forests and I say we, and this is another thing I want to kind of bring to the attention is that like the Europeans get blamed for this, coming into America.
For the state of the world.
Raping and pillaging, which no doubtably happened. Not trying to say it didn't. But more than that, it was an ideology that was the issue. And this ideology, which was Judeo-Christian and capitalist idea in that time, in that specific, I'm not talking about now, I'm just talking about in that time.
Just in their cultural framework, the way those
circumstances.
ideas played out.
And it was plague-like. And it, then coming west, eradicating the buffalo and all the other animals. But at the very tail end of it, where it was like, wait a second, and this like light bulb went on. It was like, what are we doing? Was the most critical thing that could have happened where again, I say we, but human race took the status quo and was like, let's flip that. Mm-hmm. Especially with the bison, which was down to, near extinction that had last 20, million perhaps years in America through many droughts, many different climatic changes, many different things, nearly wiped out. And all of a sudden we were like, no, wait a second. There's something here, which China kind of transformed the ideology into a more like looking at the globe as a whole or looking at holistic systems.
And I think that also happened as a function of us becoming more interconnected as we were able to understand how things were playing out on a global scale and seeing these same sorts of patterns of where places had been exploited, and you see that you are now carrying out these same processes on your newfound territory, and you're seeing how it's not working out over here. It kind of gives you that chance to be like, oh, wait, is this how we really want to be treating our land? Mm-hmm. And I think that's, like, for me, that's kind of the attitude that's how I feel about Bozeman is like after living in Los Angeles, I've seen what we can do, and now I'm like, that's not the right direction. And so and for Montana, it's the last best place for a reason, Mm-hmm. And so I really, really hope that we can take these lessons that we've learned by seeing all these places that we as transplants are coming from, taking those things that we didn't like about where we came from. I hope that we can take Montana and see where we went wrong and really develop Montana as a community of the 21st century. You know, I would like to, and we're lucky because we were born in the beginning of the 21st century. So I guess not lucky, but we don't have any way of knowing what is the general thoughts of people in this century, And I hope that we, as the people we're born at the beginning of this century, I hope that we are able to develop Bozeman as with 21st century thinking, and that 21st century thinking is this sustainable thinking of wanting to get away from the way we've been destroying
and it's a progression.
In the past. Yeah.
And that's where I'm seeing the suburban development here, which is old school thinking versus like, what's the trail that goes to the mountains from the city?
Main Street to the Mountains Trail.
Where does that start?
Starts at the Bozeman Public Library.
Perfect. And the library itself being a very sustainable building that has solar panels and the way it's facing. And I read there's like a little thing about it. It's very sustainable. I think it's like 90% energy efficient, or whatever that means. And that's that's us. That's our generation and the forefathers that had that thinking. It's not the people itself. It's the ideology that flows through many different people. So this whole bullshit of it's the white man that came, and it's like, okay, majority of them were white. Back then, they didn't think of themselves as that. They thought of themselves as Spanish, Italian, French, English, and then got lumped together. I want to move away from that type of thinking because it's deeper than it's cliche. It's skin deep. It's deeper than just the surface. It's this deep ideology that we're carrying that now we're shifting over to. And I want to see more of it. I want to see this city grow in a really healthy, sustainable way that in 50 years from now, we look back and we're like, yes, I love the fact that we thought about that. So now my grandkids or kids can just enjoy this and grow on that as well and continue to progress. We're on the precipice of all of this stuff. We're not there yet. It's going to continually evolve forever.
Right.
But I would like to see it evolve into a way where we can continue to evolve, because the current, ship we're on is headed right into the iceberg, and it's not, we got to steer clear of that.
Maybe that's what we were meant to do as people, though.
Absolutely.
Maybe we were meant to steer ourselves into an iceberg.
It's like moving to Mexico as an 18-year-old kid, somewhat intentionally, somewhat subconsciously, but to see, okay, wait a second, this life is flipped upside down, and now I have a new idea of what I want to do or how I want to approach things.
And I think that part of the reason that America's developed the way that it has is that it was colonized, and the people who came and created the dominant American culture, the culture was imported. It wasn't a function of the land, whereas sustainable and prosperous peoples in the past, the reasons why their cultures became the way that they did is because of what the land could provide to them. And these people had lived on that land for potentially hundreds or thousands of years. And they knew, well, first of all, they had an understanding that their life depends on their soil, and the things that they can produce and what nature can give to them. But like, you look at some place like Athens had a very poor, thin soil in the time of early Hellenization. But that poor soil was a really, really good habitat for grapes and olives. And so because they were able to produce grapes and olives, but you can't survive off of grapes and olives, that made them trade off these goods so they could get the resources they needed to live. And then, they got the resources that they needed to live, and they became a trade-based civilization. So then they had a timber industry to build the ships, and everything that they had that created the civilization and culture of Athens was because of what their land could provide to them, and they understood what their land could provide to them. But when we came to the United States, we didn't have any idea of what this land could provide to us, what it meant to be a part of the ecological community that already existed. So we tried to take our culture that was developed on another soil based on other properties and other things that we could produce, and we tried to apply it here, and it just doesn't work the same. And I think that as America becomes more established and we have this chance to get a deeper understanding of where we live, I think that our culture will be able to adapt, hopefully, to live in harmony with where we are.
My issue with that is a lot of people will hear what you're saying and think, well, okay, well, there's never going to be 20 million bison on the prairies again. It's just not possible.
That's true.
We've already come through, and there's never going to be those chestnut trees because they're extinct, and the passenger pigeons and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't make sense with the world that we've created. And I think that's the issue is that's not what we're saying. We're not saying we want it to be like it was and we're going to be hunter-gatherer societies and go back and living in teepees and stuff like that. But just a less myopic approach to living sustainably, to like seeing the whole, to being, why aren't we growing more food vertically? Like you were saying in another conversation we were having in New York City or Los Angeles or someplace where, why are we spending all this money transporting all this food from Montana to California when they could be potentially with new technologies growing it right there themselves, saving costs, saving carbon fuels and stuff like that. So it's not that we're trying to backtrack and be less, now just, I have to say this with hear me with a grain of salt, less civilized way of living. It's just, we would like to look at the potential of living in a sustainable society. What would that look like in the 21st century?
Right.
And another issue is, I think a lot of people don't care. I think a lot of people go to the grocery store, there's their naked juice, they grab it.
Yo, don't talk shit about naked juice, dude.
I love naked juice.
Love naked
I'm a huge
juice.
fan of naked juice.
Naked juice.
I love the name of that too. It's provocative. Makes you feel like dirty when you're drinking it. But, or they go, there's 4,000, Jesus Christ, 40,000 tomatoes on the shelf. That's never changed. It's always there. I don't care where it came from. Are they juicy? Good. Are they juicy? No.
Right. Have you ever had an organic tomato?
Right. Coming at you.
It'll
from the
change your life.
Yeah, exactly. But people don't recognize that. They just want their fish sticks and their almond milk. They don't care where it came from. They just want it consistently and they want it to taste good. And they're going to add a lot of salt. And, it's just, I'm just worried that there's not enough care. I feel like there's a denigration of society that's just me. I want it now. I don't care. I just don't care. And I think maybe what we're talking about is this sugarcoat life is not the way to live. Maybe a little bit of hardship in your damn life will do you some good. And we're always trying to push away from, we're trying to nerf everything and make sure that no one's feelings are hurt. And that no one has, physical. Let's make sure that everybody, this idea of equality across the board that is almost detrimental to society, rather than the reason that native tribes are so successful at staying alive. I'm talking about the Khoisan people of the Southern African regions, or the
the
Maasai, the Amazonian, and now that's very broad because there are multiple different tribes within each and ethnicities within each. But the fact that the people of the Namib Desert are potentially the oldest people or groups of people on the planet, and they're still alive and they're living in the desert, means they're doing something right. They're really going about it in the right way. I totally went on a tangent.
But it depends what your end goal is.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Because their end goal is to survive and to live in harmony with nature. And that's also, I think that's one thing that's kind of interesting is these older cultures who have survived for so long is they're still very deeply religious and mythological. And I think that part of where we are now is a result of us. I think it's part of the postmodern age that we live in where obviously religion isn't real, people, I think that religion has truth to it, but I think that the general cultural idea
You're
is
talking
that,
about society as a whole.
I think that the general idea is that we have moved past religions, we've moved past mythology in any meaningful way. And I think that religion and mythology are the things that kept people in a healthy relationship with the earth, because all these natural forces were personified as gods that were obviously so much more powerful than them, and there's
some fucking humility.
Yeah. Whereas now we feel like we are the gods. We control this territory.
Science is the end all. Science will conquer everything. We no longer need to live in these systems because we'll just figure out a way to bypass that.
Right. And so I kind of have a romantic wish we could harken back to the time where we had fertility cults and things like that,
Yeah,
where people
absolutely.
would go and gather under the moonlight to pray for a strong harvest that year, because they understood that they were at the mercy of the earth. And I just think that's a beautiful idea, And I don't think that we can get back there, because obviously, it's like we've opened Pandora's box.
Right. You're too far down the rabbit hole to find our way back to that.
But
spot.
we need to find a way to conceptualize ourselves as part of the whole again, and not being the absolute masters. Or maybe we need to recognize that we act like the absolute masters, and we need to respect that role, that we are now the stewards. And if we're the masters, do we want to create a shitty place to live, or do we want
to speak biblically, we get to create heaven or hell.
Yeah.
At this point, we are in the Anthropocene. For people that don't know what that means, there are geological epochs throughout time. What were we in the Holocene prior to this? And this is just climatic changes and geological changes in time. And for the first time in the Earth's history, a single species is able to change the climate and the geography of the land. So no longer are we in the Holocene, we're entering the Anthropocene, which we are near God-like, at least demigods. We're still mortals, but man, we have a lot of power. And to your point, we have to be responsible with that power, because we have the ability to create near utopia or projection towards utopic ideas or dystopian hell. We get to choose. And that's where people not caring is a really big deal. And people don't understand. They just want their Netflix, and they just want to, be alone and have their Instagram followers. And I honestly think that many of the debate topics in the last presidential election were absolute garbage, off the point, not that necessary to talk to when we have serious implications with the environmental damage that we're doing and other things, but that being one of the major things that was really barely even talked about.
And that's a shame too, because I think that the issue of the environment is so heavily politicized, where the Republican candidate, you're not going to hear in a Republican presidential debate, you're not going to hear them talking about conservation or what's the best, if you were going to ask, if you were to ask about what should we do about the hypoxic zone in the Gulf of Mexico and our large-scale monocultures, what are we going to do about this? We're killing the ocean. We're not going to be able to sustainably produce this amount of food in the future. You would be laughed out of the convention.
Absolutely.
And
this is about abortion and gun rights.
Yeah.
The real traditional American values and morals and stuff like that. And I get it. I personally believe that liberalism comes more from a thinking, feeling from the heart, which is more of an individualistic and group mentality. Is kind of an oxymoron there. Whereas a more conservative mindset is more in the logical realm, where you're looking at more like statistical rather than necessarily feelings or emotions. And that's why it's the left and the right wing of the same bird, because everyone has both of those, but you focus a little bit more on one or the other,
right?
Or that's natural inclination for one or the other. And you're right. Because it got politicized, it's like every time an environmental issue comes out, it's like you rally against it on the other camp just to shut it down, because potentially the Democrats could get their foothold in that, and then all of a sudden we're up to our ears in owls, as George Bush Sr. said. It's like,
did he really say that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Up to
because
our ears
because of the spotted owl in Utah, there are so many restrictions put on it. What a lot of people don't understand is, when we protect a species in the Endangered Species Act, it's not just that bear that gets protection, it's that bear's habitat. So now that area can't be mined or logged or whatever. And so when the conservationists come in, they say, well, the bear needs, and I don't know the numbers, but X amount of square miles for its habitat range, then that area gets put into a system and then calculated with all the other bears, and that area is protected, or that forest is expanded. And that's where economic interest, the logical mindset of building a country, that's where Donald Trump from the left doesn't get credit. But it's like, from a logical perspective, he's looking at how to run an economic country, and he's doing the decisions that would be necessary for positive growth. And I understand that, but at the same time, from the holistic perspective, he's ignoring a lot of things that, okay, yeah, economically that makes sense. Pulling back Bears Ears National Forest in Utah for mining, it's like, well, duh, let's pump some money into this system. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, you are taking back not just a family that gets to drive in their minivan out to Utah and look at pretty stuff. It's like, there's a lot more than that. It's not just, oh, we want the pretty trees and the birds and the bees to be happy. We're talking about serious economic implications of detracting, or the Pebble Mine up in Alaska is up for debate. A massive untouched area of salmon spawning, beautiful, pristine wilderness, which is potentially up for one of the biggest mines in America. If an oil spill happened there, and I'm talking economically, the salmon harvest would be absolutely desecrated. Tourism would go down. And I think a lot of people don't understand tourism and hunting, fishing, how much money that generates. In Montana alone, on public lands, hunting, fishing, and recreating produces over $7 billion annually. That is $1 billion or $2 billion shy of the marijuana industry in the United States as a whole. That's some serious cash. Yeah. And now you're saying if we have a oil spill or a landslide, or you're going to be taking away from that, think about the economic implications of that. It's overlooked because, it's a liberal idea. I'm in this camp. I can't even think about that. It's like, let's back up here and look at the whole. So
yeah, and it's just that tension between economics in terms of just straight raw numbers versus economics in terms of externalities and future potential costs. And it's just hard to see that, especially when our election cycle is only 4 years, and if you want to be a good president, you better get those unemployment numbers down. Right. You better pump that GDP up, and that's how you become a great president. That's the numbers people care about.
Possibly. But then there's Teddy Roosevelt, who everybody fucking hated him. Everybody was like, get the hell out of here.
I mean, they obviously didn't hate him if they voted for him.
Right. Well, I'm saying a lot of people in legislation were very against Teddy Roosevelt putting aside land. So before Teddy Roosevelt, a president could be like, that's a nature preserve. He couldn't do a park. He couldn't do a national park, but he could say, that's a national preserve. That's this, and this. Congress was like frantically fighting to change that law so that he couldn't because he wanted, it started in Florida. I don't remember the island. There was a specific bird that was going extinct for the feather trade in like Paris for ladies' hats. Yeah. And he just heard about it, and he just said out loud, well, let's make it a national park. They're like, sir, you can't do it. He goes, I'll make it a national preserve. He's like, okay. He goes, I declare it. He just stomped his fist on the table. He's like, well, we have paperwork to sign. He's like, I don't care. Let's send it to me, So he just started. He couldn't make the Grand Canyon a national park, but he could make the flatlands above the canyon a national, the canyon walls itself a national monument, and he could make the basin inside a national preserve. So he did that, but he couldn't make it a park. So he's doing everything he could to save, because they were going to develop the Grand Canyon. Can you imagine that? If instead of this beautiful, untouched, pristine wilderness, there was just hotels and a little town in there. I mean, it would just be taking away from so much. So
it would be kind of,
it would be amazing. Sure. You can look at that side.
Imagining the idea of living in a city in the Grand Canyon is kind of crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like if you could like carve.
So that's
into
why
the
people, and that's why people were very against what he was doing. But in the long run, everyone's like, man, one of the greatest presidents, or at least I certainly think so. With that kind of foresight, man, like that's what really gets you, is what you're remembered in 100 years makes you a great president. Not if you just boost the economy, because there's no way that this economic surplus is going to last. We're going to have another recession in a couple of years, and everyone's going to blame it on Trump, blame it on Obama, blame it on
whoever's in power.
Blame it on whoever. It's easy to blame it whoever's in office for sure, but you want long-term growth, you got to be thinking way different than, let's just open up more mines, more drilling. Let's just pump out money. That's not the way to do it.
I know. I love the Native American idea of trying to take care of the earth for the next 7 generations. I think that's a really beautiful idea. And I think that's where we need to be. We need to think less and less about ourselves and our economic needs, and we need to think about creating a world for our children. Like, and this is obviously one of the main like qualms that millennials have, is they're always like, oh, look at the world that our parents created for us. You know, like we're inheriting economic ruin and the planet is in ruin. And the planet's not in ruin. We've got a pretty significant chance to, I think, right our wrongs. But I think that there's a lot of resentment about this world that we're inheriting. And I think that if we want to not be hypocritical in that resentment, we have to really be thinking like the Native Americans. We have to be thinking about maintaining this land and having acting in a way that's going to preserve this land for the next 7 generations. We have to think about our kids. We have to think about our children's children, and etc. Because otherwise, what's the point? You may get yours, but
Sorry, I had to go pee.
Yeah,
you did great though. I could hear you.
For those of you who thought that I was losing my point, I was just trying to ramble to cover for Beau.
Yeah, no, it was good. I had to pee so bad. Okay, thank you. And I did hear what you said. And that the 7 generations thing is great. And we're seeing a little bit of that. Do you know about Myers soap?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I
like
used to clean a building and they only let me use Myers.
Now that's fantastic, and I like that. And I think there's a lot of potential. There's a booming young business that's doing a very sustainable method. And if I'm shout out to Myers Soaps. I don't even know.
If you're looking for someplace to advertise.
Yeah, definitely. If you want to advertise with us, go out and get yourself some soap. Read the back. They do dish soap. They do hand soap, and I think bars of soap and stuff like that. But they do it in a very sustainable way. They're kind of like 7th generation. Actually, I think 7th generation is also a soap company.
Yeah.
So also shout out to 7th generation, where they're thinking ahead. They're thinking far ahead, and this is the future. Why are we still living in this industrial age? We're way beyond that, you know?
Well, I think we're in a period of transition.
We are.
I think that's really what we're seeing is we're
we probably need to give credit where credit is due. Oftentimes it's easier to see the faults.
Mm-hmm. Which is like, why aren't things moving as fast as they should be? And it's because if things could move that fast, it could be potentially disastrous. Like, I think it's a good thing that things move slowly so that we have the chance to course correct. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's easy to be frustrated that things aren't moving as fast as they should be. Mm-hmm. But what you gonna do? All you can do is push forward and hope for the best, you know?
That's another thing about this generation, or generation is like years, but I'm talking about the ideology once again, is shout down the bad stuff, but they're not really given solutions.
Right.
Like I see a lot of this behind the keyboard protesting, but it's not like, hey, this thing is going on, and like, what if we tried this instead? Everyone get on board. It's like, you suck, you're the problem. Mm-hmm. It's this, and this. It's like, great, you found a problem, but now you got to stop telling me about it and start telling me what I can do about it. I think that's
I think also we're in a position where like a lot of people aren't in the position to really make useful change.
Yeah.
You know? And you want to feel like you're doing something, and sometimes the only way you can feel like you're doing something is by yelling at the person who you feel like isn't doing it right.
Yes,
you know?
Exactly. It's much easier to see the faults in other people than in your own. So It's much easier to, that's why I was a vegetarian when I was a younger kid. And I think partly it was for good reason, but also I did a lot of proselytizing, like, you know, you're eating, you even know what you're doing? It's like, do I even know what I'm doing? You know, like.
Well, I think that a lot of vegetarians make the case against the meat industry and against eating meat in general. And I think, as somebody with a agriculture background, I think that the production of meat fills a really important ecological niche if we're going to try and create a sustainable food system. That to say that if you're eating animals, you're the problem with our agricultural system, I think that's totally wrong, because like cows are such a valuable, like ruminants in general, I'm not going to say just cows, are such a potentially huge benefit to us in an agricultural system, that if you were going to say, oh, if we want to be sustainable, everybody has to go vegan. That's the way we have to go. It's like, No, definitely
not
not.
at
You
all.
can't cut out a whole part of the system.
And for the majority of the human existence, I'm talking 99% of time, we've been eating meat.
Right.
We've been hunting, and we've been later on then husbandry with livestock. But it is a very rare instance where you find an entire group of people being completely vegan. I'm not talking about vegetarian. I know there's been some vegetarian cultures, especially in like Hindu cultures. Some, not all. That's what another group of people don't understand. It's like they just group like, oh, Hindus are vegetarians. It's not all of them, and not to the same degree. Each one is different and stuff like that. But you never had this time when we didn't eat meat. We're part of the landscape in that way. And so, yeah, I think that's one example. I was trying to bridge to the homecoming coronation. There's going to be a huge gap. But for people who are the young generation, how it's like, find a problem. That's what you're like in school. It's like, all right, find a problem and start screaming at people about it. And that's where I think a lot of this stuff is like, okay, we're bringing to attention a lot of things, but maybe we don't really need to be bringing attention to that. Or maybe we're like rushing, like you said, like rushing way too fast into certain things. And one of the things I want to bring up, and we both read this in the Bozeman Daily Chronicle, was how this year, for the first time since Montana State University has been doing homecoming, instead of a king and queen, they're going to do
Homecoming
ambassadors.
Court. Oh, yeah.
Ambassadors to represent to
Do you
more
want-
equally represent. Do you have it?
I've got the quote somewhere on my
Yeah.
phone, but I just remember, I forget who says it. But
Something
it was
about-
some administrator. Their quote was that they wanted to make this change because they felt that it was more progressive and it more accurately represented the student body.
Yes.
But
So they had 8 contestants or court.
8 ambassadors. Who were,
Ambassadors.
or 8 people who were submitted as options to be ambassadors.
Yeah.
And the idea was that the ambassadors, instead of being homecoming king or homecoming queen or prince or princess, is that they're people who embodied a certain value, which I think is beautiful for sure. I really like that idea of trying to elevate or bring attention to people with good qualities instead of it kind of being like
Yes.
a popularity
and that was
contest.
the thing. There were 3 categories that they needed to, I guess, score high in or represent.
Yeah, it was people who were like active in the community, who were leaders, and I
Can't remember the other one, but and I like that idea for sure. And they also, I think, underlying all of this stuff though was, the whole gender topic.
Yeah,
and
for
I think it was, they don't want to assume that king is boy and all that kind of stuff. And so the results of this were that, do you remember it was like there were out of the 8 contestants,
there was only one guy.
There's only one guy. So
one thing, just quick aside, that I just remembered, my high school, my homecoming king or my homecoming queen was a gay man.
okay,
In my high
there
school,
you go.
my senior year.
And now I'm not. This is fragile ground to be walking on because
I just think it's interesting. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But
no,
it's just
that's not what I'm trying to say either. It's like it's not that it's wrong. It's just like does 7. I don't know how to do ratios very well, but 7 out of 8 women to men. That's not an equal representation of our school.
You mean 7-1?
7-1 rather. Yeah, that would be it. To represent our school, it's like there's a lot of guys in this school, and I get that as if you're trying to include transgender as a part of that category. I get it, ambassadors, that kind of thing. But the problem lies now in that that's an inaccurate representation of our student body.
Right. And that's like what bothers me, because I don't give a shit about the homecoming king and queen or like the tradition related to
Right.
that, because it's just like a popularity contest in general normally, But I think to make the assertion that you're doing it because it represents the community better, I think that's just not true.
I would need to see it over a couple of years' time. Again, we got to look at the long term.
Yeah.
And if next year it's 6 guys and 2 girls, well, then maybe I'll feel a little bit differently about it. But this year I was just kind of taken back by that.
Yeah.
That we can't use the words king and queen anymore because it's somehow offensive. And this is where I was trying to backtrack to the thing, is that I feel like we're protesting things that aren't like, is this really that important? Is it that important that we need to literally change our not culture, but the traditions in that way. Like, who's really that upset?
Yeah.
Really? Like, I don't even, homecoming is today. It's probably the game already probably happened.
Yeah.
We got 6 inches of snow. I'm not going to go to a game like that.
I know they had the homecoming parade was this morning at 8:00.
Yeah.
I feel so bad for everybody in the marching
and a lot
band.
of them were on bicycles. Oh. So, and the other thing is, but I'm there to see the game. I don't give a rat's ass about king and queen. So I guess I really don't have a dog in this fight when it comes to this thing. But it's just that when we're focusing all of our energy on such, and this is just the tip of the iceberg on so many other things that people are like diving into. That's like, how far are we going to go with some of this stuff?
Right.
I get it. Let's be progressive. Let's bring on, and I love that idea of having those 3 qualities about a person, not just a popularity contest.
Yes.
That makes total sense. Call them ambassadors. That's fine. But where are you going to see a lot of, I think, a negative side of this is I don't think men are going to be as interested in this as women are. I think
Potentially.
And I think that's my thoughts about that. My own opinion on that is I think men are going to be less inclined to do something where it's a participation grade rather than a like challenge is not the right word, but more of a competitive. You know, I think there is something to popularity when it comes to some men, you know, and prior to this, it was only if you were in a fraternity or a sorority could you be homecoming king or queen.
Right.
So to their credit, they definitely are opening it up to more people, but you know, so.
Well, one thing that I think of as we're having this conversation is one thing you and me are obviously both, or I guess not obviously, but one thing that we've had conversations about, and we're both against the equality of outcome idea. And I think that sort of when we're saying that by having 7 women and 1 man, it kind of feels like we're trying to then push that equality of outcome idea, but in the reverse, you know, like if the women are the ones who are embodying these traits more so than men are on campus, do they not deserve to be represented that way? Shouldn't we let the chips fall how they may?
That's a very good point. I really didn't think about it from that perspective, and I think that that's probably because here's my idea on a lot of things is that if you're the right person for the job, you should get the job regardless of your race, sex, all of the things.
Right.
So yes, I do agree with what you're saying, but in the same thing, what I said earlier is I don't think men are going to be as inclined to even participate.
Right.
That may be where the divide is, but that's a really good point. I didn't think about that. So to their credit, I see where they're coming from, and maybe I'm a little bit resistant to that change. I don't know. Maybe I'm a traditionalist, and I like the idea of roles being played out because I think that's how our society has been structured for millennia. And I think just trying to sweep it over in 1 year and try to change something like that is going to come with a little backlash, and not just maybe subconscious backlash.
Right.
Where it's like, this doesn't feel right, rather than
right. And that's the same that's the same sort of thing I had, where initially upon reading this, I had that same idea of like, it's all women. There's only 1 guy. Like, that's obviously BS. Like, why aren't we being represented in there?
Right.
But then really thinking about it, you have to be like, maybe this isn't for us, you know?
That's true.
But for the reason why that maybe comes off as being worrying to me is just because it feels like we're in a time where men are kind of being swept onto the rug, being pushed back, you know?
Yep.
And this looks like another place where now, we're not a part of this conversation. We're not a part of this area or whatever.
And a lot of feminists are upset with what you just said.
Yeah, I know.
Because like, oh, you poor man.
Yeah, whatever.
You've had the privileges your whole life, and now we're trying to do something and you can't be involved, and boo-hoo. But to your credit, in a more egalitarian society, because of this, now men may start a group that's going to not interest women, and it's not that they're excluding women, it's just that maybe more interesting to women,
and so what I want to see is I just want to make sure that we don't go so far to one side to where we're like, yes, we're making things more inclusive to women are getting more representation. I think that's great, but I just want to make sure that men, we still have our spaces. want to go so far in righting these wrongs that we completely write out our spot.
And I'm 100% on the same page as you. And for the
No way. You as another man are down with not writing men out of the conversation.
And for the record, it's like if I had to have a surgery and there's a doctor and there's a man and a woman, let's just say a black woman and a white man, and the black woman's been doing surgery for, 15 years more, and she's clearly more competent. I'm going to pick the one that's going to not kill me.
Yeah.
Of course I'm going to pick her. I don't give a shit when it comes to anything really. If they're more competent, they should get, and that's what true equality is. Those who put the effort in and those who are deserving of the experiences should get them opportunity to do them, and so it's not like I'm sitting here mansplaining or really trying to blubber over this stuff. I really think that there's two ways of creating this new equality that we're trying to do. And one way is pulling the men down to raise everyone else up, especially the white men, let's say, or the white men pulling everyone up to their level. And, I'm sure a lot of people disagree with the latter, but I'd like to hear an argument for why not to just pull everyone up rather than like bring other people down to make equality. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
And I think a lot of men are now getting lumped into a group where it's like, you're getting dismissed. And it's like, is that really the best way of doing this? And I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. Yeah, so I don't really know how I feel about this homecoming thing in general. Now that we've had this conversation, I think it could be a move in the right direction because obviously I think that it's good to highlight people who are actually doing good in the community.
Definitely, and it is progressive. My worry is the runaway train of progressive.
I just don't know if because it's progressive is also a great justification in and of itself.
There are some things that from our past we need to acknowledge and recognize and perhaps keep because they were valuable lessons we learned over time.
Yeah. This idea of being progressive just for being progressive's sake doesn't really make sense because does that mean that there's never a time where we've got something figured out? If something's working, should we just throw it out because that's the progressive thing to do and we have to keep moving forward? That's the thinking of the past. Because I think there are a lot of communities of people in the past who had things figured out a lot better than we do.
Oh, definitely. And back to this book that I was reading, the natives the Native Americans saw the grizzly bear. I'm generalizing again because there were many. Another thing is Native Americans are not one group. It was multiple groups.
Yes.
But they saw the grizzly bear way differently than the new Europeans, Europeans that were coming across, and their way was because the bear is so human-like, it stands up on two legs, and it's just unlike many other animals. It has very human-like characteristics. It was revered as very godlike.
That's interesting that the Native Americans saw them that way. Just as a quick interjection, and when there are animals like primates that are obviously much closer to
but not
humanity.
in North America,
right? Exactly,
in the
and so,
prairies,
right? And so I think it's just interesting that that's the way that the Native Americans saw it because that was the closest thing they had to like a human species. When like we wouldn't associate the bear as being really very human-like, but that's because we have like apes. But Native Americans also had the I forget exactly what they called it. But they had like an idea of Sasquatch, which maybe there was an ancient primate that you're forgetting about, Beau.
Yeah, that's and I believe that many of the Sasquatch sightings are just bears on 2 feet, which is also to their credit. But they saw it as, and they respected. And I'm reading about Lewis and Clark, and how Clark or one of the two was asking, they called it the white bear back then because they had the black bear, and they'd only heard stories of this white bear, this great monster. The natives would say, well, we wouldn't even go kill one unless we were at least a party of 6 to 10. Mm-hmm. And they're thinking, well, we have this technology of guns and we'll just show you what's up. And they were shooting these things 6 times in the head and it was still coming. So their idea was, this is a monster that man must conquer.
Right.
Rather than that thing is scary as hell. We're going to give it some distance and we're going to just revere it for being godlike in its approach. Like it's stronger than we are. you know, and so I feel that the fact that natives could be living with this giant bear for 10,000 years without, you know, I mean, there are nearly 5 million Native Americans on the continent at some time or another, makes me think that, yeah, you can coexist with these things. You can coexist with that natural landscape. You don't have to just desecrate it and have your own, you know, man-made structure. So to your credit, the civilization had a kind of a better idea how to approach that than we do now.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from the peoples of the past, for sure. For sure.
Wow, you made that full circle right there. You came all the way back. That was good.
Yeah.
There's some traditions that we need to acknowledge that we don't need to change. They're deeply ingrained in us, and we should. Obviously, we haven't picked up on that one, but some of these things, you know, like, and I honestly truly think about this, and I want anyone who is listening to think about this. The power goes out, and we had this conversation a few days ago, and chaos ensues. And I'm not just talking about like a power outage, but like globally.
Yeah.
What are we going to go back to? Are we going to be like,
Our current cultural framework wouldn't serve us at all in that situation.
no, it would not. You know, those people with certain skills would have the advantages over other people, but over time, yet again, these natural roles that we played for millennia are gonna come back into the landscape, and it's gonna be obvious why a lot of the things that a lot of these progressives have problem with would come back. It's very interesting that we're just floating above the chaos of nature.
Yeah.
You think we got it down? We do not. We are, you know, a tornado could come, an earthquake, the volcano that we're sitting on right now, the caldera, could blow, and we're no longer masters. We're no longer gods. We're hanging by a thread in God. That's why we're not truly gods yet, you know? But we're getting pretty close. But
once we drill into that Yellowstone supervolcano and start pumping water into it to stop it from going off, that's when we become gods. When we can avert a planet-wide disaster.
Whoa! What if we took all the seawater that's rising
and pumped it into Yellowstone?
The caldera?
I think we figured it out, guys.
We just solved the world's problems.
We solved climate change and the supervolcano.
Everyone can be happy now. And there's a lot of economic interest in pumping all that water. That's a lot of money to make that happen.
Yeah, someone's got to do that.
Infrastructure.
For sure. Then guess what? Guess what happens when you put that water on the lava?
It's steam.
Steam.
Yeah.
Guess what that means?
Moisture.
Energy.
Oh, I see where you're going. I was gonna say no more droughts. We're gonna have so much rain.
That'd be dope too. Montana just turns into like a rainforest with how much steam that's going on.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Whoa. It's a lot. We got a lot of ground to potentially cover.
Yeah.
With all these ideas.
Yeah, for sure. We want to wrap it up.
I think we
call
should.
this episode
I think
1.
we should just. Yeah, I see. We should call it episode 1 because
we've gotten kind of rambly. We're talking about pumping water into the supervolcano.
Yeah, then
generally a good place to stop.
You know that we're running out of ideas. But if you've listened to the podcast all the way through this far, I really appreciate you listening. I hope that it was somewhat coherent, and you might even tune into the next one.
Yeah, and if you care to follow the podcast, we'll put an email in the description if you got suggestions for what you think could improve our podcast. This is a learning experience for both me and Beau, and we'd like to get better. So any feedback that you guys want to provide is more than welcome.
Yeah, and if you're in the Bozeman area and you have something really interesting to talk about, or you're super psyched, especially if it's somewhat ecologically involved, and even if it's not, and if it's something that's maybe relevant to all of us, we'd love to maybe get you on here and talk about it.
So that's episode 1. Thanks for listening, guys, and we will hopefully see you back next week.
Peace.